the ones, the Albanian gypsies from Pelasgia that had moved down to Thiva. That's what I thought I heard. So I called up one of my friends there, and he says, no, and I'm calling from Halkida, where my coworker lives. And I'm calling him, and I said, I heard that some of these, no, I said, as a matter of fact, most of them had moved on to Halkida. I said, Halkida, I'm calling you from Halkida. And he said, really? And so I handed her the phone, and she found out where they lived. Not far from where she lived, in a place called Artaki. We went down there, we found them. The very first home that we went to were people that we knew.
Mike Petkof is our guest today. Mike is, well, it's kind of hard for me to know. He is from Detroit, Michigan, but he's really not. He's actually from the former Yugoslavia. He is from an area called Macedonia. And good to have you with us today, Mike.
Good to be here.
I'm glad you speak English. I'd have a difficult time if you're speaking Greek or Macedonian. Okay. Well, anyway, I want to talk about, we're going to talk about what you're doing out there, but it's kind of interesting that you grew up actually in Detroit.
Yes, I was born and raised there most of my life until I went to the country of Greece as a missionary. So, my parents both are Greek Orthodox. My father's from the former Yugoslavia, and my mother's from Greece. And then they moved to the U.S. Probably close to around 50 years ago. And so I was raised as a Greek Orthodox, per se. But then later on, when I was around 12 and a half years old, I got saved in a Baptist church in the inner city of Detroit.
How did a good Greek Orthodox boy get dragged into a Baptist church? That's my question.
Well, one of the things is it's something that there was a kindergarten teacher of mine who had a bus route with her husband, and they were going around in the neighborhood inviting children to come on their bus route to come to church, and they had a special event. And so they came and asked if I'd like to go, and I said okay, because I knew her, and she made a really great impression on me when I was a young child. And so I went there with a lot of my friends in the neighborhood, and it was the first time I heard a really clear explanation of the gospel and how I can accept Christ as my Savior. And the evangelist at the time had said, if you'd like to accept Christ, raise your hand. I raised my hand, and then he invited us to come forward, and I went to a small room off to the side, and they shared with the Word of God how I could accept Christ, and I did that. And I was all excited, hey, I know where I'm going to go if I die today. So I went home, and my mom was in there cutting up potatoes. I said, Mom, guess what? She said, what? I said, I just got saved today. She said, well, good, go in there and watch TV. I'm thinking, go watch TV? I mean, this is the most exciting day of my life. Go watch TV, she said. So I had assumed that anybody, my age or older would have accepted Christ, because I couldn't see any reason why they wouldn't have. And she didn't understand.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, did it lead to conflict at all with your parents as you got a little older?
It wasn't so much at that point. Even the little that I was going to church at the time, it wasn't until I was about 15 when I got baptized. And even then, it wouldn't have been a problem. I just thought it was just a natural thing that you would do as a Christian, because I always felt like in my Christian life, I was going up against a barrier. I could only go so far, and then I stopped. And there was something I had to do to allow me to go a little bit further. And after I was baptized, it seemed like the doors opened, and then there was a lot more avenue of ministry. I don't believe that was my salvation, but I believe that was like the first step of obedience that I needed to do. And then I felt like I was more free to do more ministry. But then the baptismal certificate came to the house. And my parents, of course, they didn't go. And then once they saw that, then there was a problem.
Interesting. Now, because I remember I was 14 at the time when I asked my parents, I want to be baptized. Mm-hmm. And there was no big push anywhere to do. It was just that in my heart, I felt, and it's interesting, you call that a step of obedience. I thought it was kind of like an identification.
Yes.
It was saying, okay, hold on, I got to identify as to who I am, whom I identified with. I mean, that was really in my heart at that time, and yes. it's really where you were as well,
yes,
in a very real way.
I wasn't looking to change religions.
No.
And to me, I was just following Christ and doing what I should do in being baptized and letting people know that I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Whereas my folks saw this as a means by which I was changing religions.
Isn't that because you didn't see it?
No.
As far as you were concerned, they loved Jesus, they knew Jesus, and you were just doing an obedient act,
Yes.
identifying with Jesus.
Right.
But sometimes some people see it as identifying with a specific church,
Right.
rather than
Or
seeing,
religion.
or a religion.
Yes.
When for you, no, I'm following Jesus.
Right.
And I think, that's an interesting point. Okay, now one point along, obviously your Christianity was very important to you.
Yes.
Your faith.
Yes.
Integrated into virtually every part of your life, I imagine, or you were learning how to see it as part of your...
Yeah. After that time that I was saved, or I got baptized at around 15, from there on there was another evangelist that came through, and he shared about how we need to be more involved in ministry. And at that point, I began to do various ministries. I was involved in the singing, and as I mentioned to my friends, the only reason I sang in the choir was because I heard another guy sing, and I said, I could do a little bit better than that. Maybe I could help drown him out a little bit. So that was the only reason I was involved in the choir, and they didn't kick me out, so I guess it was all right. But I wasn't anything special to listen to. But I also started teaching. I was probably 15, 16 years old, started teaching 10-year-old kids. I needed to be taught myself, and the only thing I had to teach by was our pastor's single-lined notes from Wednesday night service, and it was way beyond my comprehension. But I was teaching inner-city boys, 10-year-olds. And that was really special to me, again, trying to reach out to the kids that no one cared about, just like I felt myself was. I was.
That's interesting.
And then I was on a bus. I was on a bus route, and then later on I got my chauffeur's license and actually drove bus in the inner city of Detroit and was picking kids up. And then when I went off to the university at Liberty, down in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Yeah, right.
I worked there again, teaching junior, senior high inner city kids, and had my own bus route, drove my own bus route, and then eventually had to make a choice between the two, and chose to stay with the teaching. And then I would drive only when they had a need, because it became too much with that and my studies together.
But working with kids has been down deep in your
Yes.
gut. I mean, that's right at the core of who you are.
Especially inner city children, because I realized that even the people, the church that I was in, I didn't realize it so much until later on when I look back. The people that were at our church were from the outskirts. They were from the suburbs, coming to the inner city church, having church, and then going back
and go
out.
right back out the suburbs.
Yes,
but
and I felt like an outcast in the church in my neighborhood, in a sense.
Because you lived in the neighborhood.
Because I was an inner city boy. And so therefore I had a real heart for the inner city kids, and my friends were the ones obviously in the inner city. And there was kind of like a little divide between the two, between the suburbanites and the inner city kids.
There are people today that feel the call to the inner city.
Yes.
And they say when you really feel that call, you don't go there to minister, you go there to live.
Yes. You can't live in the suburbs and minister in the city.
Your heart isn't there.
Yes.
When your kids are rubbing shoulders with the other kids,
right,
and you're struggling with the kind of shops that are all on the street alongside that you wished weren't there, you'll fight for it when you're living there. I mean, it really makes a difference.
That would be no more than a missionary living out in a community, a missionary community, and just going into the inner city, doing their work, and then running back out. In Greece, we go in, we work with the gypsies there, and I will not only go in and teach and then leave, but I would go in and I would play with the kids and spend time with the kids, spend time with the adults. I've sat down in gypsy homes and sat and ate whatever they gave me. I didn't think about, is it clean, or what utilities are we going to use, what utensils we're going to use. You just sit down there and that makes them feel comfortable with you, and you don't have that divide. And you start to bring it together where they see you as being a part of them. And we were at a missions meeting just the other night, and we heard of a missionary who had gone into Africa, and the natives were talking about how that the previous missionaries were far away from them.
Yeah.
When they saw people coming, they would go in their houses and lock their doors, and we were just brokenhearted. We're like, how could this possibly be? How could you do something like that? That you're there to minister to them. how could you not want them to come and visit
with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you open your. Yeah. Well, but there is a tremendous cultural difference.
Yes.
I mean, if you're used to a society and a culture where you have your boundaries, and the boundaries are at the edge of your property, and people don't come there unless they're invited, and now you move into another culture. And there are cultures like this where
They walk right in.
where your house is my house.
That's
I mean,
right.
your casa is my. I mean, that idea,
Yes.
and that's a very real part of
Yes.
their life. And if you don't embrace them, they're saying, well, you don't have an open heart.
Right.
And how can you minister to them? No,
Right.
okay. Now here you are. What is your heritage? You're Greek.
Greek and Macedonian both, or Yugoslavian. To
Yeah,
make
because
it,
Macedonia
politically
was
correct.
part of Yugoslavia.
Yes.
But is now a separate. It's a country of its own.
Yes, it was part of the whole Yugoslavia, and it had its own specific dialect of Yugoslavian, but then the northern part of Greece is also Macedonia. So it was a large region there, and now it's split up, and so there is a little problem there with the name.
Okay, so you have Macedonians living in Greece, in what was Yugoslavia, which would be Macedonia.
Right.
What about Albania? Are there Macedonians living in
There's like
Albania?
a small section of lower part of Bulgaria and Albania, and the southern part of Yugoslavia, and the northern part of Greece. All that region at one time was considered Macedonia.
Macedonia. So when I read in the book of Acts, Paul went to Macedonia, or the Macedonian came. Did he look like you?
I don't know. I guess because I'm half Greek and half Yugoslavian,
At least
I
half
guess
of him
maybe
would
that's
look
a good
like
possibility.
Okay, why? I mean,
I don't know. You might have had a little more hair than I did, but I don't know.
We won't worry about that. But anyway, you were working with kids when you were in high school. You worked with kids when you were at college.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go into ministry to children right after college, or did you go into mission work?
No, actually, when I was in college, I always felt a call to go and become a missionary in probably either Yugoslavia or in Greece, but primarily it seemed to be going towards Greece. And so, because of the fact that I learned Greek and Macedonian in my home as a child,
and it would have been cultural. I mean,
Yes.
you spoke the language
Yes.
of the people. So to
I
speak.
could not say, I never felt the call. Many people used to say, "Oh, you should you're going to be a preacher. You should be a pastor." I'm like, no, I never felt the calling to be a pastor. But I could never say no to God that I'm going to be a missionary, because I learned 2 languages without having to go to school to learn them. And so then I was just trying to find out where God wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. And so then when I got married to my wife, before I got married to her, I told her, I said, there's a good possibility that I'm going to be a missionary to Greece. And she said, well, I feel like God has spoken to me about being a missionary as well. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But after we got married, I didn't feel it was the right timing.
Okay.
Because there were some issues there that had to be dealt with in my wife's life. And so I felt like I'm going to wait. And so I waited.
Now that's interesting. In other words, you didn't want to subject her to a culture and to the pressures before she was ready for it.
Right. And so I prayed and I said, Lord, I'm ready to go anytime you want me to go, but I will not go until you've spoken to my wife first. And it was really unique because...
Thank you for your sense. No, that's very powerful, because it could have been a destructive thing that happened. Go on.
And we may not have been there very long.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, how did God work all this out? This is cool.
It's a story. So I prayed and I said, Lord, I'm ready to go. You speak to my wife, and then I'll know that you're leading. And so about 3 years passed, and then one Wednesday night I went to church. And during the Wednesday night service, I heard one of the guys from our church had, so it was a little
tense,
risky there. But then I heard that it was happening on both sides. Atrocities were occurring on both sides. So if I was in Macedonia, I was heard anti-Serbs. When I was in Serb, anti-Bosnians. And then you heard both sides. And there was atrocities on both ends. And then after that, I came down and visited my family in Macedonia area, then went back to Greece for another week. And it was during their, have like a missions conference. So at that time, I was, again, serving in the kitchen, or outside at the serving area, and the young people were just sitting around, didn't know what to do. Well, the guy who was in charge before was not there this time. So I'm like, I remember what he did. Why don't you go and fill those things up with water over there, and why don't you go pass out, put the plates out? And so I just kind of took charge there. So no one said that I couldn't, so I did it. And so I was there in the programs and listening. And then the Child Evangelism Fellowship workers came up and they showed their slides. And I had seen many slides in my day, so it wasn't nothing specifically interesting in that to me. But they did this little skit with the children. They had 10 children. They said there was 10 missionaries. One child would go forward and say there was 10 missionaries. One of them got sick, and now there was only 9. The next child would go forward. There was 9 missionaries, and one of them couldn't raise enough support, so now there was only 8. There was 8 missionaries, and one of them, the parents wouldn't allow them to go. Now there was only 7. And they would continue down the line like this. And then finally the last one says there was 1 missionary left, and they went and they did a great work for God. And I thought, oh, what a beautiful little skit. So I went up to them afterwards, and I said, I like that skit that you did. I'd like to maybe get a copy, and maybe I could use it one day, whenever I find out what ministry I'm supposed to work with. And so... So then they said, well, actually, we took it from the Today's Child magazine, which was the Child Evangelism Fellowship magazine, and we interpreted it, or we translated it into Greek. And then they started sharing a little bit about their ministry, and they said, well, we also have this campsite. We have this piece of land that we want to develop into a campsite. And then God said, that's it. I said, well, this is why I'm here, and this is what God is calling me to do.
Wow.
So I talked to them, and I said,
yeah, that's...
Got on the phone.
You got your man. You got your man.
Called my wife and said, I know where we're going to be. Straight off. I knew, there was no doubt in my mind. I hadn't even met with the previous director who pioneered the whole work of Greece. They took me up to Thessaloniki, which is the first time I'd ever even been there, and introduced me to her, and we had like a little small interview. She was concerned that I wasn't going to come and then go, because I guess they had a previous person that did that. And it's like we were burnt once, we don't want to be burnt again by another American. And I said, no. I said, this is what God wants me to do, and that's where He's called me. And, I'm long-term. I've been there now for 12 years and going on our next 4-year term soon.
And you're there for what, the next 60 years?
Well, as long as I can keep my wife there and ministry keeps going, I'll be there. So.
Now, you've raised children there now. Since
yes. My 3rd child was actually born there. He's 6 years old now. Our middle child, Peter, was a little over a year old when we went, and our oldest had just turned 4 after we arrived.
So they speak what?
They both speak, all 3 of them speak Greek and English, and they're also taking German as a 3rd language in school. Wow. So they're in the Greek public schools there.
So, okay, you're in the camp, or you have a camp there. Is it
yes.
primarily a camp that you work with? Who are the children that come to this camp?
Well, actually, the first 4-year terms, it was more or less developing the facilities. We put 3 cabins on the campsite. Then we brought, I always had a desire in my heart that we need to do something special with this camp, because we're like up in the mountains. And within 2 hours driving time, you can be at a beautiful beach in Greece, no matter where you're at in the country.
That's the incredible thing. That's the incredible thing about Greece. How do you attract people to a mountainside when there's a beach over there?
Within a short driving range. And so I always felt like, and I was thinking of different ideas. Maybe we put an airplane here, or we put a big ship or a boat or something up there. Something that would attract their attention. Well, then, not far from where we were renting, there was a place that had old rail cars, and they had totally remodeled the inside of the rail car. And I said, well, it's a beautiful place. I said, that would be a nice thing to put up at the campsite. And so I was talking to our director, and he didn't think it was going to fly with the board, but I just kept on, because I just felt in my heart. I woke up one night after a dream and began sketching out. I don't know nothing about engineering, but for some reason, I don't even know how I did it, but I took out my laptop, and I had gone to some program and had put different things, and I had sketched out what it was going to look like. How you have a seating place and a kitchen over here. And so I really felt in my heart that this is what we should do. So my director finally says, okay, well, we'll present it, but it probably won't fly, but we'll do that. And I said, okay, that's all I want to do. And so he went, and I shared, or he had shared that, we have this possibility. And then one says, yeah, we could do this. And the other says, yeah, we can do this. And so then it just, one after another, it just went forward. And now we have 2 rail cars, one butting up against the other. This one here is our kitchen, and this one's our dining hall. We totally remodeled the inside. A church and a Christian clinic had given the financing for all of the kitchen equipment. So we have first-grade kitchen equipment. And the dining hall, we use it as a dining hall in the wintertime. We put our tables and chairs in there. Or in the summertime, we pull them out, because now we have a brand new adjoining deck, which was kind of a dream to have. And we eat outdoors, and we use that for sleeping arrangements. So we have 3 cabins over here that we can have up to 42 kids. And then we have the rail car that we can put up to another 11 people up there. And there.
You work, we talked about, but you work among the gypsies.
Yes.
The gypsies of Greece.
Yes. After the camp scenario, we developed the programs and all. The 3rd term, my director said that we'd like to change our job description a little bit from the camp ministry more towards the Good News Clubs or the Bible clubs for children. And prior to that, I was more as a helper to my director. And so now I'm in charge of this ministry, and I'm thinking he has all of the contacts and everything. I didn't know really how I could develop it without his help. But again, that's what God was leading, and I said, okay, I'm willing. That's the direction. I'll do whatever I'm asked to do. And one day, my director says, we go in the summertime to these gypsy camps, and we do outreaches. So why don't you maybe go there and see if you can maybe make that on a monthly club? I said, that sounds like a good idea, because I had already been teaching one club. There's a couple of South Korean missionaries who came to Greece to work with gypsies. And they had been doing that ever since I had been there.
Okay.
So they had already been there.
You were aware of what was going on there.
They were there for already about 3 years or so. And then I went just to see what they were doing. And then as I went to go see what they were doing, the first day, she says, well, go ahead and teach. And so I began teaching and singing with the kids. And at that point, I never stopped. And so I had this one club that I was teaching on a regular weekly basis. So to go and teach some other gypsies once a month, it was no big deal. So we went, and things went really well. And then another trip that we had gone there, we were introduced to a new camp, which was some Albanian gypsies up on a garbage heap. They lived there for about 11 years. They're not accepted by society.
No, you're working with an outcast,
yes.
Very much an outcast group of people.
They lived there for 11 years. All around, it's a beautiful area, all around are nothing but olive trees, everywhere. You could see to the sea.
Isn't that pretty?
And olive trees. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah.
But where they lived,
garbage.
It stunk. There was a big hole, large hole, where they poured all kinds of different various liquids in. And there was a path where the kids would walk around. And there was sections where just the garbage was going to be spread out, and then dirt. And there was like 50 homes. These just makeshift shacks. And the only means of electricity is if they had a generator. There was one faucet way at the beginning of the road, and I don't even believe it was clean.
Right. They're not tied into the system at all.
No. They're just out of the village, just off to themselves. Well, they've been living there for 11 years, and we were going there, we were doing puppets and stuff, and then, I didn't want to just go and do a program and leave. So we started playing with them. We would get out the soccer ball, we'd get out the beach ball, play volleyball and everything, and we'd play with the kids, and we just had a wonderful time. And then one day, we would do our program. And then one day, I was going with my worker, and we went to the car to get our stuff. We told them, okay, we're done playing now, we're going to do our presentation. And so we go to the car, and I said, Theodore, look. We turn around, look. Here's the kids in a half circle. All the adults around the back. The adults in there quietly waiting. And if a kid started to say something, they said, shh, wait. And they sat there quietly waiting to hear what we had to tell them. And then you hit different groups that had gotten saved. Many of the adult guys had gotten saved there. And it was just so special to us. And we never forgot that. And then what happened was one day they closed it down. They told them, you have to leave. So now where are they going to go? So we began to pray that God would show them what they could do.
Because they are rejects of society.
They don't care. All they want to do is to
get rid of them. Get rid. Move them out of this country.
They're an eyesore. We don't even want to know that they're there. Just send them somewhere else, just as long as they're not in our area. And so that it was, it just broke our heart. And I had been teaching the kids, about Jeremiah 33:3. Call upon me, and I will show you great mighty things without knowing not.
Right. So you're saying, look, God cares.
He cares. He knows.
Wow.
And it wasn't so much. It was partially we want to make sure that they have a place to live.
Yeah.
But we don't want to lose the ministry because
there's a reception, isn't it? There's an openness.
They love us, and we love them so much, and we didn't want to lose that contact. And so, just to show you how God works, This was up in what's called Pelagea. So down below there, some of the people, because around the olive trees, they would go and they would pick them in season. So out of season, they really they don't have anything to do other than maybe finding odd jobs or going into other areas to work and then come back. Well, some of their, the people who gave them jobs would give them a little piece of land so they can put their little cabins down there. But others had to leave and they went into other parts of Greece. And so like, where are we going to find them? Well, then there was another area called Pharsala, and across the main road, out in the field, there was a place called Vanvaku. So there where they had cut down the wheat, there was a whole group of those Albanian gypsies, probably about 50 houses. And so we found out about them. So we went there, and it was just like reuniting family from many years back. It was a fabulous time. We had a wonderful time. And so, we kept on visiting them there. Then one day, we have a worker down in Halkida, which is down near Athens. It's kind of like an island off of that. And so I had told her, I said, if you want, I'll be willing to come down there and help you out to start some clubs. And so she invited me, and so I went down there, and there was a place called Thiva. And we knew of some gypsies that were going to a church there, and they were being ministered there. And I said, well, why don't we go and visit them where they live? And that way we can visit with the other children that maybe do not go to the church, and visit with the adults, and visit them on their property. So I felt like that was a better thing. Instead of inviting them to your
bringing
place,
them out,
you
go
go
where
to where they're
are.
at. And that way you get to visit with all of them. And the adults would come, and other people from there, they would all come. And so we visited with them there. And then I called them. I said, well, I think there's some of the ones, the Albanian gypsies from Pelagea, that had moved down to Thiva. That's what I thought I heard. So I called up one of my friends there. And he says, no. And I'm calling from Halkida, where my coworker lives. And I'm calling him, and I said, I heard that some of this. He said, no. I said, as a matter of fact, most of them had moved down to Halkida. I said, Halkida, I'm calling you from Halkida. And he says, really? And so I handed her the phone, and she found out where they lived. Not far from where she lived, in a place called Artaki. We went down there, we found them. The very first home that we went to were people that we knew. And it was kids that we had ministered to. The adults knew who we were. And then other kids in the neighborhood. There was like a whole area where they had found some abandoned warehouses, and they made their homes out of it. Again, it wasn't the best, but it was much better than where they lived before. And they just opened their doors and said, yeah, come anytime you like. The father, when he's out in the field, he would come back from his work because he knew we were there to be there with us. And we spent time. We showed movies. And we invited the kids and the people from the neighborhood. We had probably about around 40, 50 people sitting on an old wall with no roof outside. We showed the pictures and showed the Jesus film or showed various movies, Christian movies there. And then also did songs with them and various things. That's the thing, that some of our kids don't go to school, but they would learn the songs
quickly.
Yeah, and you go there, the moment they see you, they start singing those songs that you had taught them. And if you give them good biblical songs, those words stay in their heart. And they remain there. And so that message is being spoken.
Wow.
They may forget everything you've told them, but that song stays on. And gypsies, that's part of the culture.
The music is such a
Yes.
huge part of their background. And it's who they are.
Yes. And so God...
So God, what you're saying is God really cares about gypsies, and He cares about everybody. I mean, people that. So you've been called to people, and your heart is out there.
The inner city kids, as far as I'm concerned, they're the rejects of society. They're the inner city kids. They're I call them like the Samaritans of the Bible. They're the ones that no one wants to even step foot on their property. They don't even want to come close to them. They see them on the street. And like we said earlier, they
people
walk
walk away, don't they? They walk on the other side.
They see me on the street, say, hi. And I'm thinking, who's that lady? Just a lady with a basket with her little daughter in front. And I said, oh, yeah, that's the one. We had gone with the South Korean. They had some missionaries came over from South Korea, and they were doing dental work. And we were pulling her teeth. And she remembered me from being there. So it was just so special.
So you bring the love of Jesus to them?
Yes. And they accept. And many of them, and now there's there's various groups. Even the one that I mentioned with our coworker, she's going there now with her pastor and his wife. So I'm hoping and praying that their church would get started.
Well, I was going to say, do you see churches fellowship groups, because I mean it's going to be a moving church. A church is not a building; it's a group of people that are going to be. I mean, they're obviously forming throughout the region.
Yes, and in other countries, in many other countries, many gypsies are coming to the Lord, and many churches are being started.
Yeah, I heard that in Spain. There's a large group of,
and in Romania, and in Hungary, and in Serbia.
Even some of our
CF workers. I was at a conference not too long ago in Hungary. And it was so exciting to hear from other CF workers that, we work with the gypsies. And so when I had done a little presentation about the gypsy work there in Greece. And then other ones came up and said, we have one. And, we have one. And so it was so neat to see how the CF workers had saw that same need. And God had led them and directed them to those same gypsy kids.
I got a feeling God's involved here.
Yes, I think so.
Mike, it's just absolutely. If people want to get involved, it's child evangelism.
Yes.
There is child evangelism happening in Canada. I know I've got a brother-in-law that was very involved. He's retired, even from child evangelism now.
Right here in Winnipeg, there's the local area and the provincial
province of Manitoba and across Canada.
Right.
So, but it's just delightful to hear how God works in places that we don't always hear about. So, Mike, thank you for coming and sharing the way of God in Mike Petkof's life and his dear wife.
Yes, and our family.
And your family.
16-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old. So Michael, Peter, and Alex.
Bless you. Yes. Well, thanks for being with us today, Mike.
I enjoyed it.
And God bless you in Greece.
Thank you. And God bless you all here with your ministry.
Thank you very much. It's just great to share the goodness of Jesus like this. So we look forward to another time when we meet.